Have you ever noticed how betrayal in a marriage almost never begins with something grand, but with something so small it could easily be ignored? A glance that lasts a second too long, a silence that feels heavier than it should, a change in tone that seems harmless but hides a storm. The truth is that every great betrayal starts in the shadows, with a detail so subtle that only those who are truly awake can see it. Carl Jung believed that the unconscious always speaks first in small signs, and if we do not recognize them, they grow until they explode into reality. That is why this video will reveal the hidden signals, the almost invisible details that mark the beginning of a betrayal in marriage. They are not accidents, and they are not coincidences. They are the language of the unconscious, showing what the heart is no longer able to hide. What if the future of a relationship could be read in these little details? Today, you will find out. The unnoticed change in attention. Every betrayal begins before the act itself. It starts quietly, with a shift so small that most people do not recognize it until it is too late. One of the first details that reveals the beginning of betrayal is a subtle change in attention. Attention is the invisible currency of every relationship. Where it flows, energy flows. Where it fades, distance begins. When someone is truly committed, their gaze, their words, and even their silence are directed toward the partner. But when betrayal starts to grow inside, that attention begins to drift. It does not vanish suddenly. It slides slowly, almost imperceptibly, into another direction. Jung explained that the unconscious always leaves traces, even before a person admits to themselves that something has shifted. The psyche already shows it in gestures and behaviors. A partner who once listened deeply may now seem distracted. Conversations that once carried warmth now feel rushed or empty. The eyes wander more often, the responses shorten, the energy seems elsewhere. These are not random accidents. They are unconscious signals revealing that attention, the very foundation of intimacy, is starting to be divided. The danger lies in the subtlety. Because attention does not change overnight, it changes in fragments. It may look like exhaustion, stress, or simple distraction, but deep inside, it carries another truth. The heart is beginning to look for something beyond the relationship. And because the unconscious cannot fully hide, it reveals itself in these small lapses. Every forgotten word, every absent gaze, is a footprint of desire searching for another path. This unnoticed change is often the seed of betrayal. Attention, once focused, is now fractured. And when attention fractures, presence weakens. You may feel it without being able to explain it, a sense that the partner is physically present but emotionally absent. This gap is not empty, it is filled by the unconscious, filled by longings that have not been spoken. Jung would say that this is the psyche creating space for projection. The partner begins to project desire, excitement, or possibility onto someone else, and the first sign is the withdrawal of attention from where it belongs. Why does this matter so much? Because attention is love in practice. To give attention is to give life to the bond. To take it away, even silently, is to begin breaking the bond. This is why such a small detail carries such heavy meaning. The beginning of betrayal is not marked by grand gestures, but by the fading of everyday presence. When attention slips away, the soul has already begun to wander. For the one who notices, this shift can be deeply confusing. It may feel like rejection, like indifference, or like coldness, but beneath it lies something deeper, the unconscious redirecting energy elsewhere. The betrayal has not yet happened in action, but it has already begun in spirit. And this is where the true danger lies. in the small details that go unrecognized until they have grown into something undeniable. The lesson is clear. If you sense that attention is fading, do not ignore it. If the eyes no longer meet the same way, if the presence feels half empty, it is not a small thing. It is a signal. It may not always mean betrayal will happen, but it always means the unconscious is restless, seeking something outside the current bond. To see it clearly is not to accuse, but to understand. Because in Jung's view, the soul always speaks first through details, and attention is one of the loudest details of all. The unnoticed change in attention is the quiet beginning of distance. It may look harmless, but it is the first step away from intimacy, and if left unspoken, it becomes the silent permission for betrayal to grow. Before we continue, the Jung Method can guide you. It reveals the hidden patterns of love, betrayal, and desire. The link is pinned in the first comment. The shift in emotional energy. If betrayal begins with attention drifting away, the next unmistakable sign is the shift in emotional energy. A marriage survives not only on shared routines, but on the invisible flow of feelings that partners exchange daily. Emotional energy is present in tone of voice, in the warmth of a smile, in the willingness to share a story or listen with patience. When that energy changes, even slightly, it speaks louder than words. It is often here that the unconscious reveals the second step of betrayal, the slow withdrawal of emotional investment from one place to another. Jung believed that energy never disappears. It only changes direction. In relationships, this means that when emotional energy fades in one area, it is almost always being redirected somewhere else. A partner who once offered comfort now seems irritated. A joke that once brought laughter now receives silence. Small gestures of care that once felt natural now feel forced or absent. These are not coincidences. They are signals that emotional energy is shifting, creating a vacuum inside the relationship and quietly filling it elsewhere. What makes this shift so difficult to notice at first is its subtlety. It does not arrive like a storm. It creeps in like a slow fog. The partner may still say the right words, but the words carry less weight. They may still participate in routines, but without the same enthusiasm. The soul knows when the heart is absent, even if the mind denies it, and that absence is the language of the unconscious speaking through energy. This shift is not always deliberate. Often, the person experiencing it does not even realize it. They may simply feel restless, dissatisfied, or emotionally drained without understanding why. But in truth, the unconscious is already redirecting their longings. It may be toward another person, or it may be toward an imagined possibility of freedom or excitement. What matters is that the emotional connection to the partner is weakening. This weakening, though quiet, is one of the clearest beginnings of betrayal. Consider how powerful emotional energy is. It is what transforms ordinary moments into intimacy. A simple dinner can feel like love when the energy is warm. The same dinner can feel empty when the energy is cold. This is why betrayal begins here, because emotional energy carries the truth of the heart. You can fake words, you can fake gestures, but you cannot fake energy for long. The unconscious always leaks through the way feelings flow. For the one who senses this shift, it can feel like standing in the middle of a familiar room that suddenly feels strange. The partner is there, but the bond feels thinner. Smiles feel smaller, touches feel mechanical, silences feel heavier. You may not be able to explain it, but you feel it. That feeling is not imagination. It is awareness of the shift in emotional energy. Jung taught that the soul always notices before the mind accepts. What you sense in your heart is often the truth, even when the other person has not spoken it. The most dangerous part of this stage is neglect. Many people dismiss the change in energy, telling themselves it is just stress, exhaustion, or routine. Sometimes it is, but when it lingers, it is more than that. It is the unconscious reshaping the relationship, making space for what is not, being lived. That space is where betrayal begins. The energy that once flowed into the marriage is now leaking into silence, distance, or someone else entirely. But this detail also carries a lesson. It reminds us that relationships must be fed not only with words and actions, but with genuine emotional presence. If you feel the energy shifting, it is not a small matter. It is the sign that something deep within the soul is unsettled. To see it clearly is not to panic, but to understand, because every betrayal before it becomes action is first an emotional withdrawal. The heart leaves long before the body does. In Jung's perspective, this shift also reveals the shadow. The partner may begin to live out the parts of themselves they have repressed, desires for freedom, adventure, or affirmation. And because the unconscious cannot be hidden forever, it shows itself in the way they treat the person closest to them. The coldness you feel, the distance you sense, are not accidents. They are expressions of the shadow moving into the light. The shift in emotional energy is one of the clearest warnings of betrayal's beginning. It may not yet be spoken, it may not yet be acted upon, but it is already alive in the unconscious. To ignore it is to allow betrayal to grow in silence. To recognize it is to open your eyes to the truth. Because love does not vanish in one blow, it fades through energy, and once that energy has shifted, the relationship has already entered dangerous ground. The secret distance in communication. Every relationship is built on communication, not only in words, but in the way two people share their inner world. When betrayal begins to form, communication is one of the first areas where the cracks show. It does not start with big fights or harsh silence. It begins with small changes, a word left unsaid, a story not shared, a conversation that feels incomplete. This subtle distance in communication is a detail many people overlook, yet it is often the clearest warning that emotional loyalty is fading. Carl Jung believed that what we refuse to express in words often leaks out in other ways. The unconscious finds its own language through tone, silence, or avoidance. In the beginning of betrayal, partners may stop saying the things they once said naturally. They may hold back details of their day, share less about their feelings, or choose vague answers where they once were open. The change is quiet, but it shifts the atmosphere. What was once intimacy becomes formality. What was once closeness turns into polite distance. Why does this happen? Because communication is more than talking. It is connection. To communicate openly is to invite the other into your inner life. But when betrayal begins to grow inside, the unconscious starts to protect the secret space where new desires live. Words become guarded, stories become shorter, and silence becomes longer. This is not always deliberate. Often, the person does not even notice they are withholding, but the soul knows. The silence is the unconscious creating distance, protecting the hidden longing that is rising. One of the most common signs is avoidance of eye contact in deeper conversations. The words may still be there, but the eyes shift away as if hiding something unspeakable. Another sign is humor used as a shield. Instead of answering sincerely, jokes cover the truth. Or perhaps there is irritation at simple questions, because even harmless curiosity feels like a risk of exposure. All of these are forms of distance created to protect the inner world where betrayal is quietly being born. For the partner who notices, the change can feel confusing and painful. It may feel as if something invisible stands between the two of you. You ask a question, but the answer feels shallow. You share something personal, but the response seems distracted. You sense that the flow of connection has weakened, and you are right. Communication has become selective. Instead of building closeness, it now hides what cannot be revealed. Jung taught that the unconscious always seeks wholeness. When a person begins to live a divided life, one part loyal, another part wandering, the split shows itself in speech. Words lose their natural flow because the psyche is torn. Half wants to keep the bond, half wants to escape it. This tension leaks into communication, making it incomplete, guarded, or strangely distant. The detail may seem small, but it speaks loudly of a deeper truth. The bond is no longer whole. It is important to understand that this stage is not about lies. It is about absence. The betrayal may not yet involve deception, but it already involves withholding. When a partner chooses not to share as freely, the relationship is being starved of truth. And without truth, intimacy fades. This is why the secret distance in communication is one of the strongest indicators of betrayal's beginning. It shows that the soul has started closing its doors. The tragedy is that many ignore these signs. They tell themselves it is stress or distraction or simply routine, and sometimes it is. But when the distance persists, when the silence grows heavier, it is rarely just routine. It is the unconscious protecting a new attachment, or at least a longing for one. The unsaid words are not empty. They are full of meaning. Every silence is a choice. And every choice reveals where the heart is turning. For the one who sees it, the challenge is painful but powerful. You are faced with the truth that communication is not what it once was. Yet, this awareness gives you strength. Because if you can see the detail for what it is, you no longer live in illusion. You recognize that betrayal does not begin with actions outside. It begins with the silence inside. It begins when one soul stops sharing itself fully with another. The secret distance in communication may feel small, but it is not. It is the third step in the journey toward betrayal. The eyes no longer meet the same way. The stories no longer flow the same way, and the connection no longer feels whole. And in that gap, the unconscious speaks louder than words. It says, "I am no longer entirely here." To ignore it is to let betrayal grow unseen. To notice it is to open your eyes to the truth, the hidden restlessness of the soul. Every betrayal begins long before the first step is taken. It begins in the silence of the heart, in the restlessness that cannot be explained, in the feeling that something is missing even when everything seems complete. Jung believed that the soul is always searching for wholeness, and when parts of it are repressed or ignored, restlessness begins to rise. This hidden unrest is one of the clearest signs of betrayal's beginning, because it drives the unconscious to look for what feels absent. At first, this restlessness does not appear as betrayal. It appears as boredom, dissatisfaction, or a vague unease. A partner may seem distracted, irritable, or strangely distant, not because they no longer care, but because their soul is unsettled. They may not even understand why. They may tell themselves it is stress, routine, or exhaustion. Yet beneath the excuses, the unconscious is whispering, something is missing. And when the soul feels incomplete, it begins to seek outside what it cannot find inside. This restlessness is dangerous because it is often invisible. It hides behind daily routines, polite smiles, or busy schedules. But it reveals itself in small details. The partner who seems restless at home, but alive in other environments. The one who avoids deep conversations but craves distraction. The one who appears tired, but suddenly finds energy in unexpected places. These are not random shifts. They are signs that the unconscious is already reaching outward, preparing the ground for betrayal. Jung explained that when the psyche represses desires, they do not disappear, they go underground. There, they grow in the shadow, waiting for a chance to surface. The hidden restlessness of the soul is the shadow pressing against the walls of daily life. It says, "There is more to me than this." If that energy is not recognized and integrated, it seeks expression elsewhere. And often, it finds expression in forbidden attraction, in connections that promise to awaken what has been silenced. For the one who observes, this stage can feel confusing. The partner may still perform their duties, still show affection, still keep routines, but something feels off. Their energy is unsettled, their presence feels thinner, they may seem restless without reason, as if searching for something they cannot name. You may notice it in the way they move, in the way they sigh, in the way they avoid stillness. The soul that cannot rest is already leaning toward betrayal, even if the person has not admitted it to themselves. This restlessness is not always about another person. Often, it begins as a personal struggle. The soul longs for freedom, excitement, or passion that has been buried. But because the unconscious expresses itself through projection, the partner may attach these longings to someone outside the marriage. That person becomes the symbol of what the soul craves. The betrayal does not begin with love for another. It begins with the restlessness of a soul that feels incomplete. Understanding this detail changes the way you see betrayal. It is not always about rejection or failure. Sometimes it is about the human condition, the constant search for wholeness, the hunger for meaning, the refusal of the unconscious to stay silent. Betrayal begins when this hunger is ignored inside the relationship and begins to look for expression elsewhere. The small detail is not the act, but the feeling, the invisible unrest that slowly pulls the heart away. The lesson here is to see restlessness for what it is, a signal. It does not always mean betrayal is inevitable, but it always means something. In the soul is unsettled. To ignore it is to allow the shadow to grow stronger, pushing toward forbidden paths. To recognize it is to open the possibility of healing, of bringing the hidden desire into light before it turns into betrayal. Jung taught that integration of the shadow is the path to wholeness. Without it, the shadow rules from the dark. This hidden restlessness is the silent root of betrayal. It is the moment when the soul begins to whisper, "I want more." It is not loud, it is not obvious, but it is persistent. And unless it is faced, it will lead the heart to wander, first in imagination, then in action. Every great betrayal begins here, with the silent unrest of a soul that cannot be still. The subtle break in intimacy. Betrayal never begins with a sudden collapse. It begins with cracks so fine that they almost go unnoticed. One of the most telling details is the subtle break in intimacy. Intimacy is not only physical closeness, it is emotional presence, trust, and the quiet comfort of being fully seen by another. When betrayal begins to take root, intimacy is the first place where absence is felt. What once was natural becomes forced. What once was effortless becomes rare. Carl Jung often said that intimacy is the meeting of souls. It is where masks are dropped and the unconscious finds safety in another. But when a partner begins to withdraw, that meeting no longer feels safe. Instead of leaning closer, they lean away. Instead of sharing freely, they hold back. The unconscious, restless and searching, begins to protect itself by creating distance. That distance is not loud. It is quiet, subtle, and often explained away as stress or fatigue. Yet beneath those excuses lies the truth. The soul has already started to close its doors. The break in intimacy can be felt in many forms. There may be less tenderness, fewer gestures of affection, or a noticeable coldness in touch. Eye contact becomes shorter, less alive. Conversations that once led to deep connection stop at the surface. Even in moments of physical closeness, something feels absent, as if the body is present, but the heart is elsewhere. These small absences speak louder than words. They are the unconscious signaling that connection is being redirected, even if no one admits it. What makes this detail dangerous is how easy it is to ignore. Many people dismiss the changes, telling themselves it's just stress or it's just a phase, and sometimes that may be true. But when the break in intimacy persists, it is rarely just stress. It is the unconscious shifting loyalty. The partner may not yet have acted on their longing, but they have already begun withholding their deepest self. That withholding is the seed of betrayal. Jung taught that what we withhold in one place will seek expression in another. If intimacy fades in the marriage, it will try to find a home outside. This does not always happen immediately, but the pattern is clear. The unconscious cannot live in silence forever. It needs connection, it needs reflection, it needs to be seen. When it no longer feels safe within the relationship, it looks elsewhere, and the first sign of that search is the break in intimacy. For the partner who notices, the experience can be painful. You may feel as though something is wrong, but cannot name it. You may sense the absence of warmth, the heaviness of silence, the loss of closeness. The paradox is that the other person may still be there, still fulfilling duties, still acting as though nothing has changed. But the truth is felt in the smallest details. Betrayal does not need grand confessions to reveal itself. It whispers in the absence of intimacy. This stage also reveals the shadow. Jung believed that the parts of ourselves we repress eventually find their way out. A partner who represses their longing for passion or freedom may withdraw from intimacy at home because the shadow is alive elsewhere. That does not always mean another person is involved, but it does mean the unconscious is preparing the ground. The absence in intimacy is the shadow saying, I cannot give myself fully here anymore. The subtle break in intimacy is often the hardest sign to accept. It feels vague, unclear, easy to explain away. Yet, it is also one of the most reliable. When intimacy weakens, the bond weakens. And when the bond weakens, betrayal becomes possible. It may not yet be visible, but it is already alive. The lesson here is not to live in paranoia, but in awareness. To notice the small changes and honor what they mean. To recognize that intimacy is not just routine, it is the lifeblood of a relationship. When it fades, the relationship is in danger. Jung's wisdom shows us that intimacy cannot survive where the soul no longer feels safe. The subtle break is not an accident. It is a sign, and if ignored, it becomes the path that leads to betrayal. In truth, betrayal is not born in the body. It is born in the heart, in the quiet withdrawal of intimacy, in the decision, conscious or not, to stop giving oneself fully. That is why the smallest breaks matter, because they are never just small. They are the beginning of the end, if left unseen. The first signs of secrecy. Every betrayal carries with it an invisible wall of secrecy. Long before any concrete act, the seeds of deception begin to grow quietly in daily life. It rarely starts with big lies. It begins with small omissions, hidden details, and unexplained gaps. These subtle acts of secrecy are among the clearest signs that betrayal has begun its course, even if it has not yet become visible. Carl Jung believed that the unconscious cannot completely hide itself. It always leaks into behavior, into gestures, into the small inconsistencies of life. When a partner begins to nurture secrecy, it is usually because they are protecting a space that they do not want exposed. It may not even involve another person yet. Sometimes secrecy starts with inner fantasies, private thoughts, or conversations that feel too personal to share. The act of withholding itself is the first betrayal, because intimacy cannot survive where secrecy grows. The details are often small. A sudden protectiveness over the phone, changes in how time is explained, or a reluctance to share plans that were once open. The partner who once spoke freely now offers vague answers. The partner who once left their world open now begins to close doors. These changes may appear harmless, but they reveal a deeper truth. The unconscious has already separated one part of life from the other. That separation is the root of betrayal. The danger of secrecy lies in its power to create distance. Every omission builds a wall between two people. The one keeping secrets feels divided, carrying both duty and hidden desires. The one sensing secrecy feels excluded, left outside of a world that was once shared. Over time, this division corrodes trust, and trust, once weakened, is difficult to restore. What makes it worse is that secrecy thrives in silence. The more it is ignored, the stronger it grows. Jung would describe secrecy as the shadow at work. The shadow is the part of the psyche that holds everything we cannot admit, our forbidden desires, our repressed impulses, our unspoken truths. When secrecy begins, it is usually because the shadow has gained strength. The person is no longer able to live fully in the open. They must protect a hidden space where the shadow can breathe. That hidden space is often the beginning of betrayal. For the one who notices, secrecy can be the most painful detail. It may feel like confusion, as though the partner is present but not transparent. Questions may be met with defensiveness or with irritation, as if asking is an invasion. Simple conversations may now carry an invisible tension. You sense that something is being held back, even if you cannot prove it. And the truth is, you are right. The unconscious is already protecting itself, building walls that push you further away. What makes secrecy so destructive is that it does not require lies to damage intimacy. Even silence can betray. To withhold truth is to deny closeness. Every detail not shared is a piece of the relationship removed. This is why secrecy is one of the strongest indicators of betrayal's beginning. It is not only about what is hidden, but about the choice to hide at all. That choice, whether conscious or unconscious, reveals that the bond is no longer whole. The lesson here is not to obsess over every detail, but to recognize patterns. Secrecy is not always about betrayal, but it is always about division. It shows that something in the relationship is no longer being lived in the open. That division is the first step toward betrayal if it is left unchecked. The small detail of a hidden truth may seem harmless, but it is a symbol of a larger split in the soul. Jung's wisdom invites us to see secrecy for what it is: the shadow speaking. The partner may not yet be fully aware of what they are hiding, but the act itself reveals the unconscious already preparing for separation. Secrecy marks the point where honesty ends and betrayal begins, not in action, but in intention. The first signs of secrecy are the most important to notice because they tell the story before it is too late. They whisper that the unconscious has chosen a path of division, and unless those secrets are brought into the light, they will grow into actions that break trust completely. Betrayal does not appear suddenly. It is built, brick by brick, with every truth withheld, every silence kept, every door closed. The truth is simple. Intimacy cannot survive secrecy. The smallest detail hidden today can become the deepest wound tomorrow. That is why noticing secrecy is not about suspicion, it is about awareness. To see it clearly is to understand that the shadow is already alive and betrayal has already begun to write its story. Into the emotional investment elsewhere. The most painful detail in the beginning of betrayal is not always the absence at home, but the presence given somewhere else. Betrayal starts when emotional energy, once directed toward the marriage, begins to flow into another space. This shift does not always involve physical closeness. More often, it begins as emotional investment. Attention, care, and enthusiasm being redirected to someone or something outside the relationship. What makes this stage so dangerous is that it feels harmless at first, but it silently steals the intimacy that once belonged to the couple. Carl Jung believed that energy is the essence of the psyche. Where our energy flows, our soul follows. If a married person begins investing more energy into another person, even without intention of crossing physical lines, the unconscious is already creating betrayal. A message answered with too much eagerness, a conversation that brings more excitement than those at home, a growing attachment that feels like friendship, but carries the weight of hidden desire. These are not accidents. They are signals that emotional loyalty is shifting. The detail to notice here is not only time, but quality of presence. A partner may spend hours with you, but seem detached, while giving minutes to someone else with full intensity. That contrast reveals where the soul is truly engaged. Betrayal does not begin when bodies touch. It begins when hearts choose to invest elsewhere. The unconscious reveals this truth through passion. Wherever there is passion, there is investment. And if that passion is stronger outside the marriage than inside, betrayal has already taken root. The shift is often subtle. It might look like constant checking of the phone, laughter at private jokes, or a sudden eagerness to share details with someone else while offering silence at home. It may appear innocent, and perhaps at first it is. But the danger lies in repetition. Every drop of emotional energy poured outside the relationship is a drop removed from the bond. Over time, the bond weakens, not from grand fights, but from small investments given elsewhere. For the partner who notices, the pain runs deep. You may feel as though your presence no longer lights their eyes the way it once did. You may feel replaced, not in body, but in spirit. The harsh truth is that you are not imagining it. Emotional investment cannot be hidden. It shows in excitement, in energy, in the natural flow of conversation. If someone else brings more life to your partner's world than you do, betrayal has already begun. Silent, invisible, but real. Jung would call this projection at work. The restless soul projects its needs onto another, seeing in them the freedom, passion, or affirmation it cannot find in the marriage. That projection creates a bond, even if it remains unspoken. The unconscious does not care about social rules. It seeks wholeness, and if it imagines finding it outside, it invests energy there. This is why betrayal often begins long before the act. It begins in the mind and the heart, in the energy that flows toward another. The most dangerous part is that emotional betrayal is often minimized. People say, it's just talking, or it's just friendship. But deep inside, the soul knows the truth. Emotional loyalty has already shifted. The detail may seem small, but it is enough to change everything. Because marriage is not only about physical exclusivity, it is about where the heart rests. And when the heart rests elsewhere, the body soon follows. The lesson here is to recognize emotional investment for what it is, the beginning of betrayal. It may not yet be visible, but it is powerful. It reshapes the bond quietly, weakening intimacy until it becomes fragile. Jung's wisdom shows us that what we invest in grows. If energy is invested outside, that connection will grow. If energy is withheld at home, that bond will wither. The unconscious does not hide its priorities. It reveals them through where it invests attention and care. This stage is one of the most critical to notice because it reveals the truth before betrayal becomes undeniable. The detail of emotional investment elsewhere is not small. It is the heart leaving the relationship in silence, and unless it is seen, it will continue until the silence becomes distance, and the distance becomes a choice that cannot be undone. Satati, moment betrayal becomes visible. Betrayal does not explode out of nowhere. It grows silently through details, the fading of attention, the shift in energy, the distance in communication, the unrest of the soul, the cracks in intimacy, the rise of secrecy, and the investment of emotions elsewhere. All of these details prepare the ground for the final stage, the moment when betrayal becomes visible. This is not always the act itself, but the undeniable signs that the bond has been broken in spirit. Carl Jung believed that the unconscious cannot remain hidden forever. What lives in the shadows eventually rises into the light. The moment betrayal becomes visible is the point where what was once secret can no longer be disguised. The changes are too clear, the energy too different, the truth too heavy to deny. It may be found in words spoken without care, in absences that can no longer be explained, or in the coldness that turns daily life into routine without heart. At this stage, the betrayal that began in silence finally reveals its face. The detail here is not always dramatic. It might be a slip in words, an unusual absence, or a message discovered by chance. But the real revelation is not in the evidence. It is in the feeling. The betrayed partner often senses the truth long before it is confirmed. The unconscious speaks through intuition, and that intuition is rarely wrong. The visible betrayal is not the beginning. It is only the moment the hidden story becomes undeniable. For the one who sees it, the experience is painful but clarifying. You may feel broken, but you also feel awake. All the small details that once seemed disconnected now come together as pieces of the same truth. The betrayal is no longer a suspicion, it is reality, and though it hurts, it also frees you from confusion. The small signs you noticed were never accidents. They were the voice of the unconscious, warning you of what was to come. This stage also carries a deeper lesson. Betrayal becoming visible is not only about loss, it is about revelation. It shows what was hidden in the soul, what was denied in the relationship, what could no longer remain in silence. Jung taught that even the most painful truths carry meaning. They push us toward awareness, toward growth, toward a deeper understanding of ourselves and others. Betrayal is never only about destruction, it is also about unveiling. The visible betrayal forces everyone involved to confront reality. There is no more space for illusion, no more room for pretending. The unconscious has spoken loudly, and the truth has entered the light. For some, this becomes the end. For others, it becomes the painful beginning of transformation. What cannot be denied can finally be faced. And in that moment, as hard as it is, the opportunity for truth is born. But, above all, the detail to remember is this: betrayal is not sudden. It is built on small signs, small choices, small silences. To see them early is to awaken before the damage is complete. To ignore them is to walk blindly into heartbreak. The moment betrayal becomes visible is only the last step in a long path that began with the smallest, almost invisible details. And this is the message Jung would want us to carry. Awareness is protection. To see clearly is to free yourself from illusions. To notice the details is to give yourself the power to choose before the unconscious writes the story for you. The signs of betrayal are not mysteries reserved for later. They are already present in the smallest changes today. So let this truth stay with you. Every betrayal starts with a detail. And by seeing that detail, you can protect yourself, understand the soul's hidden voice, and face reality with strength and clarity. If this video opened your eyes to truths you may have overlooked, remember, we will continue exploring these deep insights together. Carl Jung's wisdom about love, desire, betrayal, and the unconscious has much more to reveal. So make sure you subscribe to the channel, like this video, and turn on notifications, because the next videos will take you even deeper into the mysteries of relationships and the human soul. Stay with us and do not miss what comes next.